I'd like to call the special call meeting of January 7th to order. Reverend Carol Trax for invocation. Thank you for coming.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks for being able to gather tonight. Not everyone in the world has that right. We thank you that we live in a country where we can elect officials and where we can hold opposing points of view. We ask your blessings on these elected officials tonight. Give them insight and wisdom and discernment. Help them use their power wisely in making a decision that will be for the greater good and yet remain sensitive to the needs of the minority. Bless them, guide them. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Will Collins will lead the pledge. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is a public hearing on mining moratorium ordinance. Memoranda dated December 28, 2007, and this is legislative. The process will be, we're going to have a presentation of staff. We will then have questions of staff if there are any questions. I will then open the public hearing. We will listen to everyone who wants to speak. We are here to listen. We will have no clapping, though, please. This is going to be a lengthy meeting. Please collect your thoughts before you come to the mic and try not to be redundant. But we're here to listen. And please use all your manners, as I know you will. Then after everyone has had an opportunity to speak, I will close the public hearing. We will then have questions of staff if there are any left, or new questions we have of staff. And then we will set forth to have some action. So that's how we're going to proceed. I also have two sheriff's deputies, Scott and Dwayne, here, and they are going to help with the order if we need to, which I'm sure we won't, but they're here for help anyway. And we appreciate that very much, gentlemen. Now, we will begin with staff. If there's Will, we'll start with you.
Before we get started, Commissioner Davis had some conversation with me this afternoon about disclosing a potential conflict of interest, and I'll let you go ahead and...
Yes, thank you. I did have some conversation with the county attorney. It's well known that my brother has a permitted mine here in Indian River County, and therefore I will not be voting on the final moratorium language, or at the final for it to pass. If there's amendments or anything like that, I may have an interest in something in partake in that. But as far as the vote for the moratorium, I believe it could be construed that my brother may financially gain from my decision. Therefore, I would abstain.
Okay, thank you. But you will participate.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, anything else, Will?
Just get started on the presentation. On October 23rd, the board directed the preparation of an ordinance to halt the acceptance, processing, and issuance of new mining permits in the unincorporated area of the county. And since that time, we've been going through the process with various advisory committees, and the board has held one previous public hearing on December 18th. State law or case law requires that moratoriums be adopted with at least the same formality as a rezoning ordinance, and in the case of rezonings initiated by the county involving 10 acres, 2 public hearings are required. This is the second public hearing by the board and final one. The Professional Services Advisory Committee considered the advisability of a mining moratorium on December 6th, but were unable to pass a motion, although 2 were proposed to exempt 3 mining applications currently being processed. The Planning and Zoning Commission considered the matter on December 13th, and by a 6-0 vote recommended passage of the mining moratorium with the following exemptions. First, annual renewals of operating permits for existing approved mines as of the effective date of the ordinance. Second, a 2-month incidental to construction Monday through Friday off-site hauling allowance pursuant to the existing county code. Third, that existing operating mines involved in the completion of State Road 64 laning west of I-95 not be affected. And fourth, staff level administrative approval for minor changes to existing operating mines, including but not limited to on-site moves of construction trailers and changes to haul route. This staff level exemption would not apply to any expansion to the acreage excavated of an existing approved site, nor the area of development of approved existing mines. Two of the exemptions recommended by the Planning Commission have been modified in the final ordinance presented. The staff felt that changes in haul routes might be a topic of changes during the moratorium, and they recommend limiting staff authority to change haul routes, so that no longer is an exemption. And the 2-month incidental to construction exemption has been revised to include all activities that are currently exempted under the county mining ordinance. And just to give you a flavor of what those additional exemptions are, it would include agricultural use products like drainage canals, stock watering ponds, subject to certain criteria, earth moving in conjunction with installation of a utility where the excavation is backfilled, construction of public roads on public property for state, local, or federal roads, graves, approved sanitary landfills, activities regulated by the Florida Electric Power Plant Siting Act and Transmission Line Siting Act, and the aforementioned excavation incidental to development permits, which in the first instance is limited to a 2-month period, and there's a second incidental to construction that can be up to 18 months, but there's substantial additional criteria that are unlikely to be satisfied in the time frame of the moratorium. Another exemption under the existing mining ordinance is maintenance dredging of lakes or canals and any ponds related to a single-family residential lot, provided that certain criteria are met. So what we've done in the new ordinance is specifically reference those exemptions that are currently in the code. The ordinance itself, the substance of the ordinance is a prohibition which states that no applications for mining administrative permit approvals shall be accepted or processed, and no mining permits shall be issued until July of 2008. And at the time this draft was put together, we weren't really sure when this hearing would be and when the 6 months would run to. But this being the 7th of January and it taking a few days to mail the ordinance to the Secretary of State in Tallahassee, I think the expiration would be July 10th of 2008, which would also be the date of a board meeting in the event that any extensions were contemplated to be necessary. And as I said, the exemptions have been revised to allow renewals of operating permits for existing mines as of the date of the ordinance, all activities currently exempted under the county mining ordinance, the existing mines involved in completion of State Road 64 laning west of I-95, and staff level approvals involving on-site moves of construction trailers, but not including expansions to any acreage excavated nor area of development of existing mines, nor changes to haul route. That's the ordinance as it's proposed now. Now, there is an additional statutory requirement that was adopted by the state legislature in July, which requires the Board of County Commissioners to consider any information that's provided by the Florida Department of Transportation, which regards the effect this ordinance would have on the availability, transportation, and potential extraction of construction aggregate material on the local area, region, and state. And in response to that statutory requirement, we requested some input from the Florida Department of Transportation and did receive a letter which I'd like to read into the record. It's fairly short, just so you can fully consider their point of view. This comes from Anath Prasad, the chief engineer for the Florida Department of Transportation in their Tallahassee office. And the letter reads, "Thank you for your request for information regarding the 6-month mining moratorium Indian River County is considering. At 5 p.m. on July 17, 2007, 3 of the largest limestone mines in Florida ceased their operation pursuant to an order issued by the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida. This order emanated from a permitting matter which is currently pending before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit in a case styled Sierra Club versus Robert B. Flowers. The affected mines are located in the Lake Belt region of Miami-Dade County, and had they remained in operation, they would have been expected to produce some 20 million tons of limestone in the 12 months following the court-ordered closure. The loss of this anticipated production is of grave concern to the Department in light of the fact that it will result in approximately a 20% aggregate shortfall for Department uses. While the precise effects of this shortfall in aggregate supply has not yet been determined, it is safe to say that it will produce costly delays, stop work situations, and the deference or outright cancellation of Department projects throughout the state, which will in turn translate into safety and efficiency issues for the traveling public, as well as negative economic impacts for the state as a whole. Similar concerns were expressed by the legislature in Florida statutes adopted in 2007, where they found that there is, quote, "There's a strategic and critical need for an available supply of construction aggregate materials within the state, and a disruption of the supply could cause a significant detriment to the state's construction industry, transportation system, and overall health, safety, and welfare." To address these concerns, the legislature imposed restrictions on local governments' abilities to impose mining moratoriums, provided for expedited permitting, and created the Strategic Aggregates Review Task Force. That task force was charged with the duty to evaluate the availability and disposition of construction aggregate materials and relating mining and land use practices in the state, and report its findings to the governor and the legislature by February 1st of 2008. Inasmuch as the ultimate outcome of the Lake Belt litigation could result in a substantial reduction, if not complete termination, of mining in the region, the Department must develop new sources of limestone aggregate to ensure its ability to meet its obligations to maintain and improve Florida's transportation system. The enactment of the 6-month moratorium the Board is considering could impose a significant delay in the Department's efforts to develop alternate sources of supply in Indian River County. Accordingly, the Department would request the Board to refrain from taking any action on a moratorium on rock or sand mining until it has had an opportunity to review this Strategic Aggregate Task Force report. The Department believes that such an approach will enable the Board to strike a proper balance between environmental concerns and the needs of the traveling public. In response to that request for delay until February 1st, I think if the task force is anticipating completing its report on time, and the results of that matter will certainly be reported to the Board, and if there's something that comes out of that suggested that the moratorium should be lifted immediately, that could be done through an ordinance on 10 days' notice rather than the about 6-week process that we've gone through to get to this point. Another thing the new legislation that he referred to includes is a limitation on any moratoriums to no more than 12 months. Our moratorium is contemplated is for 6 months. Some people have expressed to me that in order to get a good end product in terms of revised land development regulations that address community concerns, land use impacts, traffic impacts, notice, groundwater effects, that it may be difficult to conclude that within 6 months. If that's the case, we should probably have the staff report their progress on an interim basis, and if we're 4 months out and it looks like we can't complete the work in the 6-month period, we should start initiating an extension between 6 and 12 months, whatever is felt to be needed. But the process may not be quite as lengthy as the 6-week process we've just gone through, because we won't be dealing with the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays where we had some meeting cancellations and a little difficulty in scheduling. Also, as we've gone through this process, I've received some correspondence from attorneys for the wild turkey proposed mine, and they've raised some concerns with respect to the fact that the moratorium can't be used for the impermissible purpose of denying the mine application. And I think they've raised some legitimate concerns. There's a law in the state of Florida that precludes any change of regulations which would result in an inordinate burden on property rights that diminishes the value of the property that should be borne by the public at large. It's known as the Burt-Harris Act, and it allows a claim for damages for the diminishment in value as a result of any property right. And I don't see it as a realistic outcome of this moratorium for anyone to anticipate that the effect would be an outright ban on mining in all agricultural mining districts or even A1 mining districts. The potential diminishment in the property right spread over the entire county could be in the hundreds of millions of dollars in potential damage claims. And it's my observation of how this process has come along that the intent of the moratorium is not for the sole purpose of defeating the approval of the wild turkey mine. In fact, some of the issues that gave rise to the moratorium involved mines that were already in existence on 82nd Avenue, the Hammond and Smith mines, and some concerns that arose out of them in terms of notice, haul routes, etc. And the objective of the mining moratorium is to maintain the status quo and not approve, process, or issue any mining permits during the period of the mining moratorium, while the staff has an opportunity to research what would be better sets of mining regulations to address land use compatibilities, groundwater effects, etc. And as a result of some of our staff and commission attending the meetings of the Strategic Task Force, we've gotten some very good information already on what's going on around the state, what other counties have been done. Certain counties have already expended hundreds of thousands of dollars in research, and hopefully we can incorporate some of the advice and conclusions from the groundwork that other counties are developing or have developed. I think that summarizes the points that I wanted to make in introducing the background, what the ordinance is intended to do and what it may or may not accomplish. But I think the end goal is to come up with an ordinance that better protects the public health, safety, and welfare and ensures compatibility between mining operations and any land uses that are in relative proximity to it and its haul routes.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. We'll start over here. At this point, Commissioner O'Brien, any questions of our attorney?
No, the state specifically gives the ability to have a moratorium of up to 12 months. I don't think the fact of imposing a moratorium is a legal issue. It would remain to be seen what the final result is of the 6-month or whatever the new ordinance is we have. Then someone may have a legal claim, but I don't see anything that would preclude us from moving forward with the moratorium at this point.
Any questions, Mr. Flesher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Collins, thank you very much for your very thorough presentation. You did clarify some questions that were, I'm sure, out there as well as in my own mind. I just want to touch base on one statement you made that if there is a decision in February, the outcome of that committee, If it were to alter what may or may not take place tonight, then
Well, the state DOT has suggested that you put off adopting the moratorium until that report is in. And all I'm saying is when the report is in a few weeks, it'll be made available to you. And if you think that that's the basis for changing, assuming that you do adopt a moratorium, that report changes your thinking on the matter, it could be revisited in fairly short order, about 2 weeks notice, basically.
Commissioner Davis?
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Collins, I understand the process by which we could end it in the moratorium, but my question is in 6 months, assuming, and I'll quite honestly, I don't think we'll wrap this up in 6 months. What's the process for a moratorium extension? And if
the same process we've just gone through, recommendation from our advisory committees and 2 public hearings before the board to extend.
And so, therefore, we just need to post-date those meetings prior to the expiration of this moratorium in order to extend it.
We need to check on the status of our progress in about 4 months, and if it's on pace to be finished in 6 months, we're fine. But if the feeling of the people working on the project is that they need more time, we should probably initiate an extension to accommodate whatever their time needs are, but it can't be more than 12 months total.
Commissioner Wheeler?
No questions.
Thank you. Our staff, do you have anything to add to this information at this point? Do we have any questions of Stan and Bob? All right, at this point I will open the public hearing, and we have 2 podiums, and we need your name and address for the public record, and both, let's keep them both busy. We'll start at this side, and then go to the middle. And I see we already have a suit there. Not a suit, but a suit and tie.
Very good. Very good. Thank you very much.
I could be changed in short order.
That was good.
Lighten it up.
My name is Ralph Evans. I'm an attorney practicing law in Vero Beach. My address is 1420 Shorelands Drive West. I represent the applicant for the Wild Turkey Mine. And I'm here to speak to you a little bit about the mine, the permit, and the moratorium. I hope to be a little bit informative. I hope not to be too insulting. No offense. I hope to strike a little fear in some hearts, and I hope not to make anybody sick to their stomach. What is the Wild Turkey Mine? It's an application on 800 acres of property on 82nd Avenue. The application is to mine 230 acres of it. 230 acres of the 800, it's on the north end. It would be on the north side, northwest of what is referred to as the Sexton Ranch conservation parcel. We, of course, are not in favor of a moratorium so long as it impacts that application. We think this whole process that's been conducted here since the 23rd of October was designed to beat this permit. I submit to you that the resource at Wild Turkey is a valuable one. It is not only valuable to the applicant, but it's valuable to the people of Indian River County for 2 reasons. One, what is there and what is intended to be mined is road base. I've been told that in this county, we use about 3.5 million tons of road base a year. I went to the task force aggregate workshop or meeting in Tampa, and I learned something there about road base and its transportation. It costs you, I am told, 15 cents per ton per mile. Now, if you're buying road base and you're moving it 20 miles, that's $3 a ton. If you're using 3.5 million tons a year and you're hauling it 20 miles, you're spending $10.5 million to transport it. The mine at wild turkey is 3 miles from State Road 60. We have a project that begins in July of '08 for the improvement of State Road 60 from 66th Avenue to I-95. I don't know where that road base would come from, but I suggest to you that if it comes from the wild turkey mine, some part of $10.5 million or whatever tonnage is going to be used in that job will not be spent. And the second resource that's there is, it's a little harder to grasp, and a lot of people might groan over this, but it's a water reservoir resource. Now, there's been a lot of discussion, at least in the second times we've had conversation about this, about water. When you're finished mining 230 acres of mine, you're going to have 230 acres of lake. Now, I'm going to read some things to you later about water, and I think you're going to get the idea that water is maybe a more valuable resource in the state than road base. But the crux of all this really, for us, and the part that is either going to strike fear in your heart or make you sick to your stomach, is that if we have a Bert Harris claim, D.B. Knight hit the nail on the head one night here when he said, or one day, that this is a gold mine. Now, no one's exactly sure how much material's there and what its worth is. But I'm going to tell you that $100 million shouldn't scare you unless you're writing a check for it. So that's what we're looking at, and that's what we're up against, and not only for the people of the county, but for the applicant. So if we're walking through this process in an effort to get rid of the wild turkey mine, that's what you may well be faced with. Now, I thought the Press Journal on January 1 was interesting, to say the least. Russ Lemon, his forecast for 2008, wild turkey mine defeated by riled residents. What? You read this already? Angry residents will wear down the owners of wild turkey property, and they'll give up plans to mine the land. That will not happen. Either willingly or after being bought out by the county or neighbors. I hope that doesn't happen, because it won't be the county or neighbors, it'll be the county and neighbors, because we'll all participate in it. In the battle, and this is what really is probably the most significant thing he said here, and it has meaning to what's going on in this whole process. In the battle, lawsuits will be filed, letters to the editor will be written, and the growth debate in Indian River County will have a new epicenter. The growth debate. So what concerns me is the wild turkey permit may be about the growth debate. You're trying to resolve a problem, and we mentioned the word foresight. We talked about what happened with the spires. I'll give you a little history on the wild turkey parcel. Within the last 10 years, I represented the wild turkey parcel in a site plan for a residential community. That site plan, we had a legal battle, staff and I, about the definition of the word cluster. Well, what's significant about it is that of that 800-acre parcel, my client was willing to give 300 acres in conservation for free. That's the 300 acres right next to the 465 acres that we bought. And in that hearing before the county commission, a well-respected gentleman, well-respected by me and everyone in this community, sauntered down to the podium and said these words: "People and cattle don't mix." And we didn't get that site plan. Too bad. Now today people are telling us that agricultural and mining don't mix. And when you get around to this part right here, when Russ Lemon says somebody may have to pay for it, because if you want to control as far as you see, you should own it. Now, I'm going to help make this point, I hope, about why we think this has all been about wild turkey. On October the 23rd, at the hearing on the adoption of the LDRs, a I think 6 to 8 people from 82nd Avenue appeared in that public hearing, and every one of them talked about the problems on 82nd Avenue, but every one of them, I'm almost sure to a man because I've listened to this twice, said they wanted something done about the wild turkey permit. Now, what happened as that meeting progressed and we got to the end of it, Mr. O'Brien mentioned the word moratorium. Commissioner Bowden said, moved for a moratorium. Mr. Wheeler seconded it, and it was approved. And there was so much excitement over passing the moratorium, it appeared that the commission forgot to act on the LDRs. In fact, Mr. Collins brought it to their attention that you have to make some decision about what this hearing was really all about to begin with. And that puzzled me then, but it puzzles me more now because after I've snooped around a little bit, I learned that the problems that people were having on 82nd Avenue had to do with the 2 mines that were operating at the time. Problems of people running trucks, the problems of Sue Spransky being run off in the ditch, of Mrs. Knight being run off the road when she was jogging, the dust, the mud, etc., etc. And what I know today is that on October the 23rd, those 2 active permits were in a state of renewal. They effectively had run their term, and on October 1 they were up for renewal. On October 23 you had that hearing. On November the 19th those permits were renewed. So the question that everybody on 82nd Avenue before they come up here and speak is they should ask you, what was the moratorium going to do for me when you had these 2 permits in an inactive state basically, and you didn't solve my problem on 82nd Avenue? You didn't solve it. So what everybody was here about on the 23rd of October wasn't really resolved. We're looking forward to resolving it in the future, I suppose, with the moratorium. So now I'm curious. So I reached the conclusion, after the fact, of course, that this is about the wild turkey permit. I wasn't there on the 23rd. And it was confirmed for me on November the 20th. November the 20th is the day that Commissioner Wheeler amends the agenda item and puts on the pending ordinance as a commissioner's matter. Now, this was not a published item, and he's within his right to do that. But the concern you have to have about it is the pending ordinance was directed at the wild turkey mine. Now, I happened to come to that meeting, and I only came here accidentally, because someone told me about this the day before, and it wasn't staff. I don't think they knew about it. It wasn't Commissioner Wheeler. It's Joe Paladin. And Joe Paladin happened to be in the commission chambers over here and discovered that this was going on. Now, when I got here, I'll have to tell you, the room was filled with people against the wild turkey mine. And this wasn't even published. One lady particularly, I mean, this is the giveaway, she came to the microphone and she said, when I heard this was on the agenda yesterday, I was so happy. I should have said, well, if somebody told me, I'd probably been irritated a little bit. So, where I'm taking you is here. If this is about the wild turkey mine, and if you go through this whole process of putting this ordinance together, you can bet your bottom dollar that there's going to be a big claim. We may not be successful. It may not even be me. Probably won't be. Give or take 20 million. Now, the choice we've offered up here is the one that's been repeated when we weren't supposed to be talking about the permit, and that was a condition. The conditions. Will has a problem with that. Will, the county attorney. There's been letters written about that. Can you put a condition on our permit that will satisfy the people on 82nd Avenue? Because that's the ones we have to satisfy. I asked Mr. Knight one day, after one of these hearings, if there's anything we could do to make this more palatable. He said no. So I can't satisfy him. I'm fairly certain. He doesn't want the mine. But maybe I can satisfy some others with these conditions. And the question really is, are the conditions enforceable? That's been the discussion. And I think that Mr. Ferguson, who also is a counsel for the permit, has written a letter and pretty well set that out. But the question you have to ask yourself is, which one do you want to choose? You want to choose to deal with a Bert Harris claim for millions and millions of dollars? Or do you want to fight over whether or not conditions on a mining permit are enforceable against the applicant? A couple other things. There was at the P&Z discussion this business about water, and I don't mean to say business about water in a slight way because I think it's significant, and it's called some kind of dewatering, not mechanical, but it's other. And everybody relies on a lady by the name of Sydney Backus, who's a PhD, has written some papers, and she has a theory about what happens to the water. And maybe it does and maybe it doesn't. I think there's different opinion on it. But what's significant about this, and you have to go to the site to think about it. Everything, when Bob Adair shows you those things, they show in places got dewatered and all this plant life died off. And almost in every case, the concern is about vegetation that's natural, the natural vegetation of the state of Florida, uplands or whatever it is. Now, you guys need to go out. I know you've seen this. I know everybody's seen this. Everybody needs to go out to 82nd Avenue and see what's there at Wild Turkey. It's an old grove. Whatever happened to the natural Florida vegetation at Wild Turkey, agriculture took care of it a long time ago. And the same thing goes for the conservation easement, the Sexton Ranch. It doesn't have, it may have some. I think there's a wetland on it, but the rest of it's improved pasture. And everybody thinks we're putting that piece of property at risk, the gem of the county. When you start paying that kind of money for something, it will become a gem for you. There's no doubt about it. You drive down 82nd Avenue, you tell me what you see. You tell me what the gem of the county looks like from 82nd Avenue. You cannot even see it. And you can't see either side of the road. You know why? Because it's covered with pepper trees. So the dewatering that people are concerned about at the Wild Turkey site already took place. It's over. Every year I take time to go to the water law seminar. You folks ought to do it sometime. It's a wonderful experience and you learn a lot of things. And I'm just going to relate some things to you because it has to do with the comment I made about reservoir, and then I'll be finished. These are all published by lawyers and scientists, and some are the same even. I'll try to lighten it up a little bit. This I thought was the most interesting thing that was said at the water law meeting. It's a quote from Mark Twain, 1884. He said, "Whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting over." I think that's just west of Mississippi. Here's a little known fact that you might find impressive. Over 2 billion gallons of water a day are discharged to the tide. That's fresh water. Estimates 2020 for Florida water use demand 10 billion gallons per day for approximately 22 million residents. In 1995, that was 7 billion gallons for 15 million residents. This, I thought, startled me the most in this seminar I went to, because I never thought of it like this. All water is owned by the state of Florida. All water is owned by the state of Florida. Every drop of fresh water that is in this state is owned by the state. And your consumption of it is based upon permitting from water control districts. Now, what's happened here and what's being generated here is a distrust in their ability to take care of the water business. When we apply for this permit, we have to jump through their hurdles also. What you folks are suggesting in this moratorium is you're going to go learn the water business. I'll suggest to you it's too big and too expensive. So, to wrap this up with two comments. One, I'll submit to you that the wild turkey mine represents a resource to this county and to the state in two regards. One, a source of road base that will save us a considerable amount of money in our own growth in this state. And it's a source of water retention or collection for the days when demand increases. The other point I wanted to make to you about water is, I thought also was somewhat astounding. 80% of the water in the state of Florida is north of Interstate 4. 80% of the population in Florida is south of Interstate 4.
A lot of pipes.
This is about choices. I'm here to ask for something. I'm going to ask you to reconsider the moratorium as it applies to the wild turkey permit. For all the reasons I've mentioned, particularly the Bert Harris claim, there's some place we can end up with this. We are committed to abide by conditions. We've told everyone that. We think every condition that we've suggested is within the scope of the LDRs. I think in the end you don't have to have a lawsuit over Bert Harris, and I don't think you have to have a lawsuit over the enforceability conditions. But we're prepared to go forward. We have something to offer to the county. Everyone has said we don't want to interfere with the use of your land. We'd like to use it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Wood, and I'm with the Indian River Green Team here in Indian River County.
Have your address, please?
Yes, 590 26th Avenue in Vero Beach. And I'll be much briefer than the last one here. First of all, I can't help it. I just have to say how appalled I am. I'm sorry. How appalled I am by the threatening and the bullying that I see around here this evening. And that I think it's very important that the citizens of Vero Beach realize that this isn't about the issue about whether it's wild turkey or not. It's the whole idea of sand mining. So whether you live in that area or not, I think it would be great for public record to state that it's not just that it's for turkey, wild turkey, it's for the entire area. We have a big problem with water here, and it's been proven and time again how much water these kind of things take away. I took a walk on that street over the weekend to take a look at it to see, you know, what am I fighting for? And there were some exotic plants there, but there were also a lot of native plants there. There were also a bunch of sandhill cranes there, and also a lot of gopher tortoises holes there as well. So if you want to negate the idea of humans, I think that there's probably some species out there that are endangered and perhaps need some protection if we can't be able to find that for the human population. I attended the Conservation Alternatives for Agricultural Lands here last May, and when we talked about getting the Sexton Ranch and how important it was to the people here. And I've also been interested in studying how economic impact, the formula that they use, and how they come up with these huge ideas of how much money you're going to lose. Personally, I think that we've got that it's not the main concern that we find out about the rock. If we need rock, if we really want to do some rock, there's a whole country here where we can get other rock. It doesn't have to be from our own county. As far as the Florida Department of Transportation goes, that's another legal issue that as long as they offer you their opinion, they can say that they wish you wouldn't do it, but they can't tell you what to do, as far as I'm concerned. I could be wrong, but this is the legal issue that I'm gaining from it. So you did follow protocol. You did talk to the Department of Transportation. They did give you the answer, and the answer is please don't, because our goal is roads. It's not people. It's not anything. It's the traveling public what is interesting to them, not the environmental concerns, and that's what they exactly said in that letter. They also said that perhaps it might take longer than the 6 months. Personally, I've been hoping that it would be more than 6 months. I am for the moratorium, and I just want to reiterate that we cannot deny that this moratorium is not over the one case of wild turkey, but the whole idea of mining in our area, through all the permits, all the mines in the area. Let's see. The only other thing that I wanted to mention was that right now we're at war for oil. And like, who was it, Thomas Edison, that the next one will be over water. And I think water is a very important element in our community. We all need it, and this will definitely suck it dry. And if you read the paper back in December about the 250 million gallons per day from the St. Johns Water River waterways that we are already losing, we have a real problem here. So it's not just one person or one entity, one applicant saying that, this is what they want and this is what they want. But we really have to take advantage of stating the fact that it's not just about wild turkey, that it's about all mines in the area, and that you have followed the correct protocol for the Department of Transportation. And I would seriously urge you to go ahead with this moratorium on mining in Indian River County. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, Danny Schaller, 2285 81st Terrace, and yes, I live at Ground Zero. I have some concerns. 5.5 years ago, well, first of all, I'll be very brief. I don't get paid by the hour. 5.5 years ago, before we purchased our property, I called Planning and Zoning, and I asked them, what's going on north? What are the plans for north of us? And they told me, you've got a lagoon there. A canal. We protect the canals because all canals reach the lagoon. So I don't know what's changed in 5.5 years, but I really have some concerns. My husband's family owns a small avocado grove in the Redlands. When their neighbor decided to mine his property, their well water turned murky and white, in addition to the traffic and the noise. We need more time. We need more time to explore why a federal judge in Miami-Dade County said no. I have some additional concerns. I homeschool a special needs 10-year-old little girl. By the time the Wild Turkey Project, if you just want to look at that project, is completed, she will be an adult. The entire rest of her childhood, she will be subjected to the noise of 400 dump trucks in and out of our backyard a day, to the environment, what effects it has on the water. She can't speak for herself. I need to speak for her, and I need to speak loud and clear. This moratorium has to be considered. We've got to look at the effects. Finally, I have some real concerns about the opposition, the people who are opposing the proposed moratorium. It's supposed to give the county time to gather facts and information about the ramifications for the opposition to tell us to go home, that we're being given false hope, and that it's inevitable. I find that very disconcerting. We owe this time to explore. We owe it to the county, we owe it to the residents, we owe it to the children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Amy Banov. My address is 2975 20th Street, and I live on 69th Street. I'm not going to stand here and threaten you with multi-billion-dollar lawsuits, and I'm not going to promise you an oasis of 230 acres. But I am going to ask you to support the moratorium. I live near the mining operations. I see what they have done. They affect the health, safety, and welfare of everyone in this county, not just those of us who have it in our backyard. The health issues you will hear more about, I'm sure, on the water issues tonight, the airborne debris. The safety issues have to do with the truck traffic. I would like to thank Mr. Baird for getting that pothole filled at the corner of 66th Avenue that I mentioned last time I was here. I hope it's on a regular maintenance schedule because it will reappear. The welfare for our citizens, traffic there is not just an occasional truck. It would be constant with more mining operations. We also can't just look at the welfare of just the people that live right there. It's for the entire county. We're talking about the water supply, you'll hear more about that, plus the welfare of those the recently purchased conservation lands that I happen to believe are a treasure. And the mining operations are just not compatible with ag zoning. It's not just about wild turkey. It's about all incompatible mining operations. It's really more about all operations that might be incompatible with ag zoning. It was recommended last time at the meeting that you look at that entire long list of approved uses or okay uses for ag properties. They didn't foresee what all those uses might be when that was written, and it's time to look at it with a very good eye. I know you don't have a crystal ball. I wish you did. That would save a lot of hassles. But those issues have come up now because of existing mining operations, proposed mining operations in general. And they're pushing our agricultural zoning beyond what it was originally planned for. You don't need a crystal ball. You need expert advice, adequate time, and the courage to make the right decision. I ask you to pass the moratorium, please.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Sharon Sexton. I live at 7880 37th Street. And first of all, I don't like conflict, so I'm sorry to all of you from Wild Turkey. This is a terrible way to meet your neighbors. And personally, I don't think you're monsters. I think you're business people. And anyway, I think that everyone has the right to do what they want to with their land. But in this case, when it affects other land in a negative way, so what I'm going to ask, and I don't know where to begin to research this on my own, but I am concerned about the water for the easement that our family has been given the really the privilege of being the stewards of for the next 100 years. Right now, farmers just pray for rain. We're sort of the canaries in the coal mines. When it gets dry, all of you worry about your, yards drying up and things like that. But when you're a farmer, you've got livestock that you care for and animals. So you can't imagine how many times a year, especially during drought season, that we worry about that. I don't know how it's going to affect us. And I also don't know, we can't put a sprinkler system in to water the lawns or to water the pastures. So I really would like a clear view and please research, someone who knows more than I do about really what happens to the water tables. I'd like to say to Ralph, the ranch really from the road isn't probably as beautiful. The pepper trees sort of hide a lot. And the pastures that improved are beautiful. Right now, those improved pastures are clover and wildflowers and greens that we planted that are coming up. The migrating birds are beginning to come in. If I didn't live there, I would still feel this way. Anyone who knows me knows how much I love animals. But again, my main concern is someone who now has responsibility of taking care of this property. Please just see that you do all the research you can for those water tables and how it affects us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, my name is Rick Patelis. I have the 80 acres, which is bounded on the north and by the west by the Wild Turkey property. First of all, go LSU. None of us are watching that on TV tonight, unfortunately.
Well, if we hurry, we might can get the second half.
I think Wild Turkey is wonderful. I prefer it with ice and club soda myself. I'm a private enterprise guy, and I salute them for wanting to make a profit. I mean, God bless them. That's what got us here. We're a free enterprise society. Great. I think it's important to recognize, however, we've got 130,000 people in this county, more or less, and you have spoken for them. They have spoken. $12 million worth of our tax dollars have gone into property just south. Why? To maintain the pristine nature of that property. And for our future, for our children, for our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. That was a major expenditure, a major statement by the people of this county and this board. I think it's important. I'm going to quote, if I may. I know this is accurate because I got it from the Press Journal. This would be a quote from, Mr. Ferguson, and I happen to agree with him 100% that this is an argument over property rights and land values, and there's too much at stake. I absolutely concur 100%. But I maintained you need to protect our property values, our quality of life. That's what we're here for. As county commissioners, you took an oath, and that was to protect the people. Protect us, please. I have no problem with them making profits. Wonderful, they should make a profit. Don't do it at my expense. Don't do it at the property owner's expense. Don't do it at the expense of the county. Speaking of attorneys, this has been interesting. I was amazed at listening to Mr. Evans. Supposedly his calculations, just by the sheer location of the wild turkey property, we're going to save $10.5 million just because it's there, because of transportation with the math that I really didn't understand. And we're not allowed for them, if they're not allowed to do that, we should pay for their loss. And a threat or an implication of a threat of $20 million as a lawsuit against the county. And again, Mr. Collins, you indicated earlier that you'd received correspondence stating that their position was a claim of diminished value. If we're going to talk about diminished value, remember, they acquired this property for land development. Land development. They did not acquire this property as mining property. If they had, under the understanding that they could mine on it, I'd be on their side right now. Legitimately, they had a business investment that should be protected. Their land project failed, as so many have in this county. So are the 130,000 people in this county. Most of them have little businesses that are going out of business now. They can't make it. Hard times have hit all of us. $3.20 a gallon gasoline, unemployment, foreclosures, it's going on. The fact that they took a hit, I'm sorry, I've taken a hit too in some of my businesses. But the reality is we have to deal with our business mistakes. And the fact that they suddenly want to mine, I've seen no reference here as to the quality of the coquina rock. The state of Florida has quality requirements, what the yield is going to be, yet they have no problem coming out with a $20 million figure. Like that, they've got it. Mr. Evans also quoted Mark Twain, which I love. Allow me to do the same. Mark Twain said that character is something that is not created by challenge. Character is revealed by challenge. And ladies and gentlemen, it's the challenge that we have and you have as a county commission. We're just getting started. I promise you. We're in for a long, tough fight. Stay the course, stand tall. Please. Again, protect us. Our country was founded on the concept of the greater good. I think the greater good here is quite evident. Just say no. Just say no to the Wild Turkey Project as a mining in its present location. If you do, and I hope you will, and again, it's just getting started. We do what we have to do to protect our county. On behalf of my grandchildren, thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Happy New Year as well. For the record, my name is Nancy Offit. I'm a resident of Indian River County in Vero Beach, and I'll speak to you tonight on behalf of the Treasure Coast Builders Association. On behalf of the industry, we oppose the moratorium. There is a major problem in Florida and throughout the South on aggregate and sand mining. I do not speak on behalf or for any of the applicants, Wild Turkey or anyone else. It's strictly an industry observation and appeal. I've been in several of the hearings in the Professional Services Advisory Committee where it was mentioned about the incompatibility of ag and mining, and it was suggested that that mining should go in industrial. Well, I suggest to you that mining has to go where the resource is. You know, if you found sand in the middle of the Indian River Mall, I mean, that's you have to go where the sand is, where the aggregate, the rock is. My husband and I, years and years ago, did have an interest in a mine on the Adams Ranch property. I can tell you it's very capital intensive, and the restrictions and the DOT requirements are very onerous. Mr. Gattelis a moment ago spoke about the greater good, and I suggest to you that sand mining and rock mining that provides infrastructure and public use is toward the greater good. Would I want to live next to a rock mine? No, I would not, and I don't blame the people who are concerned about the process. But I do know that land development regulations have recently been modified that, if enforced, will provide more protection. We can't give urban protections in rural areas as much as we might like to. You have to either decide, is this within the urban boundary and requires, and therefore gets the protection of an urban lifestyle, or people living outside in the rural areas somewhat at their risk. I ask you to consider the greater good and consider the fact of what this will mean to the industry, and not to suggest that we don't care about the environment. We certainly do. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. They are not mutually exclusive, but there has to be a realistic balance. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is Donald Simon. I live at 8080 24th Street in Vero. I've only been in Vero for 4 years now, but I feel that we're at a historic moment in time to make decisions like these, and I feel that decisions like these should not be entered into lightly. Therefore, I'm in favor of the moratorium. I found it interesting to see that the attorney for Wild Turkey got up and spoke for about a half an hour or as long as he could. My guess is kind of hoping that some of the people here would back down and go home after working all day, but I don't see anybody jumping up and running out. So I feel that people are committed to this issue, as I am, to seeing it through and being sure that proper decisions are made for the long-term economic and environmental viability of the county. I've noted that the Miami-Dade federal judge put out a 178-page ruling on the mines. So it looks like a lot of thought went into that before that decision was made. So I think, therefore, that would encourage us to go slowly and think carefully about this before we jump into it. And I find it especially troubling that the attorney for Wild Turkey would stand up there and make threats about a lawsuit, hoping that we would back down on this, when I think there's important questions here that need to be answered and should not be rushed into again. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is Susan Boyd. I live at 8025 25th Street. I do want to apologize a little bit because of the nature of Mr. Evans's remarks. I've had to change what I was going to say a little bit.
Excuse me, we can't hear. Thank you.
I haven't felt so threatened since the 60s. So it's kind of like an exciting experience again to go through. It was very disconcerting as a citizen to sit here and have such threats so vociferously expressed against you who represent us, and therefore I feel against us, the people who live in this county. I think it's obvious by now that I want to speak in favor of the moratorium. I think that some of the issues that Mr. Evans brought up, he seems to think that we should just take them on face value. I also came up with the idea is that we really don't know exactly what can be mined out of there. Has the quality been looked at? Can it really be used on State Route 60? Do his figures really make any sense? We need time to look into that. I do know a little bit about water in this county, and I do know that I think opposite of what he said, one of the problems that we really have is the fact that the aquifer is more shallow on this side of I-95, and all of this is where most of the people are getting their water from. So it becomes a more serious issue in terms of water as opposed to the deeper aquifer on the other side of I-95. And I think we need and owe ourselves the time to look at this. I also feel that Mr. Evans wasn't quite fair when he's threatening us on the fact that a lot of us mention the Wild Turkey mine. Well, sometimes in a community, it's a particular issue or a particular situation that makes the community aware of a larger situation. And I think that that's basically what has happened. What's gotten the people in my neighborhood together is the fact that the Wild Turkey, we're becoming aware of this issue of mines in the county. And it's not just the Wild Turkey mine, but obviously that's something that we're very concerned about. But we feel as though there should be a moratorium to look at the whole issue altogether and the issue of how we are zoning our agricultural lands, because it will affect us in generations to come. I heard many times Mr. Paladin assuring us for many times that he has ways that can make things easier and better for us, like pretty berms, a paved road, privately paid traffic police will make everything perfect. But I don't think that that necessarily is going to help the residents of that neighborhood who would have to endure. I mean, you really, I just want to, maybe I should just back up just a little bit, because the previous lady said something about living in a rural area. Well, not all of that area is rural. Some of 82nd Avenue was pretty well developed, particularly the southern part of it, which is where I live. And the trucks, from my understanding, are going to exit onto State Route 60. That means that past my street, 400 round trips a day for 10 hours a day means that a truck would pass by every 1.5 minutes. Think about that for a minute. Think about, as a human being, being able to endure that. Think about the children being able to play, the elderly that live in ranch land, who like to ride their bikes and like to take their walks in the morning and ride and enjoy the neighborhood. They will not be able to do that anymore. This is a really direct assault on how people are going to live out their lives for the next 10 years, and add to that State Route 60 for the next 3 years. So 3 of those 10 years, we get the double whammy. We get a road being improved right at the end of 82nd Avenue, and at the end of our own street, we get those trucks going up and down for 10 years at the rate of 1.5 minutes, 1.5 minutes, every 1.5 minutes for 10 hours a day. Do the math, it works out that way. This is a horrifying thing for us to contemplate it. But again, we're just the lowly residents. We're not of very great means. Who are we to put a fuss up about poisonous water, dust clouds, constant vibration and noise? Our properties are valued at a paltry sum compared to the potential of Mr. Sanders' acres converted into a rock mine. Since our properties are not worth as much, we obviously don't have the same property rights as Mr. Sanders. He has property rights because he'll make the millions he won't make the millions he salivates over if we win. I have no property rights because my property is just 1/2 acre and it's too small for a rock mine. My property will be virtually unsellable for at least 10 years, as no one in their right mind would even look at a house located next to a road with huge dump trucks passing by every 1.5 minutes for 10 hours a day. But then again, who am I? The state needs rock, so dig, dig, dig. Let's just dig anywhere. How about next to a hospital or next to a school? Patients and kids, who needs them? Patients are too sick to complain, and kids don't know any better. According to the Wild Turkey's lawyer, the state is desperate enough to allow mines anywhere there is rock to mine. Why should the state care if neighborhoods are destroyed, people's lives are made miserable, water is poisoned, and surrounding ag land is drained of water? It needs to feed the rock monster, or the economy will be eaten alive. I don't understand what all the moaning is about. According to Mr. Sanders and Mr. Keating, the beautiful lakes left by mining will be converted to golf courses and retention lakes for upscale housing developments. What better future to look forward to? Now, I will admit I read that in the press journal, so maybe they didn't actually say it. Well, why take this sort of sarcastic approach to a serious issue? Well, it's just that I don't understand how the proposed Wild Turkey mine, or any mine in agricultural areas, even got this far, and that we're only talking about a moratorium, not a bid to deny the idea altogether. This will be hanging over our heads of me and my neighbors for a long time. How can any town or county even consider a proposal that will make the daily lives of many of its citizens miserable for years into the future? How can a government radically change the nature of an area from a quiet, peaceful, pretty much rural, to a thunderous, peace-disturbing, heavy machine-oriented area? So why are we here tonight? Frankly, because we're afraid. We're worried that the very government elected to protect and preserve may not listen, may not have the wherewithal to do the right thing. You are our elected officials, but I am sure there are some of you up here that will have no mercy, who will not be able to relate to our plight, who will give in to big money and the interests of big money instead of the lowly taxpayer. You will give in to assurances that the project will be palatable, You will give in to arguments that we cannot stop the state's insatiable desire for rock. You will give in to the property rights argument and the threats of lawsuits. We understand that you have to look at the community as a whole and sometimes make decisions that are for the common good. What we are trying to do tonight is demonstrate that the common good demands a vote for a moratorium. We ask you to stand up for the community and do the right thing, each and every one of you. Please vote yes for a moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. No, we're not. Nope. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Linda Mitchell. I live at 8340 65th Street in Vero Beach. You've seen me up here before. You've received letters from me. One of the letters did offer to serve on a workshop should the moratorium pass, and I would like to request that some other people also do the same. We are dumping a pretty big responsibility on you, and I think that we have a responsibility to take on some of that, to give some of our time, and I am willing to do that. I do promise to use my manners, and I will not be redundant because you've heard all the things I need to say, except for one thing that has not been brought up. There was a school bus accident today in Tampa. I saw it on the news with fatalities. We have had school bus accidents here in Indian River County, not far from the area that we're talking about, and on a road, 66th Avenue, that many of the dump trucks travel. I have personal experience in the last few weeks, that courtesy is not what they are following, although they said they would. They've gotten lax about it again. It's very, very scary. Coming out of our community, which is the only way out of our community, there is a stop sign that didn't used to have to be there, that I remind people every day, make sure you stop and look, because they come so fast that you think there's no one there, and it's the only way in and out of where we live. How many school buses are on the routes that these trucks are going to be taking? And that's the only new perspective I'd like to add. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is Mike Bienvenu. I live at 5161 Collins Avenue, Miami Beach. I'm here on behalf of the Florida Department of Transportation. I was asked by Nat Prasad, our chief engineer, to appear on his behalf since he couldn't be here this evening. And basically, I just want to reiterate what he said in his letter. And I want to make it clear that the Department of Transportation does not want to inject itself into the local issue. This is obviously a very emotionally heated discussion, and we don't really want to get involved in that. But we do want to present the department's side of the story. We are sensitive to land use and environmental issues here in Indian County, and the concerns of the citizens. However, we do have a duty under state statute and under the Code of Federal Regulations to maintain a certain level of serviceability on the roads throughout the state, and that includes Indian River County. Our biggest project that you're probably all aware of is State Road 60, and it's a project that is at several phases and will be continuing to embark upon those projects if allowed to. We do have very strict requirements on aggregate. We just can't dig anywhere, take rock, and throw it in a hole. We do have strict quality requirements because when we build a road, we hope it lasts 20 years. But if we're not careful about the quality of the materials that we use, then that may not prove out. As it is with the growth and traffic levels growing, probably beyond what we actually plan. We see that roads don't really last 20 years. We really build them for a certain traffic level, and that traffic level we see is being reached much sooner than 20 years. By the way, I'm the district materials engineer for Districts 4 and 6, which is from Indian River County all the way down to Monroe County. I am familiar with the Lake Belt ruling. And just for clarification, the Lake Belt ruling was not about any conclusive evidence of any environmental impact. The reason that those permits were pulled is because the Corps of Engineers did not follow its own permitting procedures. And that's the whole issue in this case right now, not whether or not there's an environmental impact. So basically, Indian River County has to do what Indian River County has to do for its citizens. But we just want to make it clear that We do need there is an aggregate shortage, and I believe, as Mr. Prasad mentioned in his letter, that we will have a strategic review task force report either prior to or by February 1. And all the department is asking is that if you hold off on the moratorium, take a look at the results of the task force report and take a look at the big picture and make a decision based on some comprehensive plan. And that's all the department's asking for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any particular questions of this gentleman? Are you going to stick around in case we do? Or are you leaving?
Sure. I'm not getting paid hourly either. I'm here because I have to be.
Okay. We might, down the road, have some questions of you.
I'll be glad to wait.
Thank you. Next.
Hi. My name is Fran Denhart, and I'm representing the residents of Ranchland Mobile Home Park at 2055 82nd Avenue, which is the beginning and the end of the proposed truck route from the wild turkey mining operations. We have heard many discussions on the pros and cons for rock mining in our area. Because of the many problems that will be caused by this operation, we wish to express again our objection to this project as well as any other mining in the area. We believe before the Board of Commissioners make any decisions on this matter that he or she should first ask themselves, would I want this operation where I live, and what problems would it cause? When the opposition stated about the state getting involved, I believe our representatives in Tallahassee should be made aware of this problem and talk to the people who will be affected. I am sure there are other areas in the state of Florida that could be utilized without affecting the residents and also would not have some of the other problems that this type of operation will create. We can live without rock. We cannot live without water. If a moratorium is approved, individuals who will be affected should be considered to work with your staff in help solving these problems in this area. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next.
Jim Gooch. I live on 69th Street.
Pardon, I didn't get your name.
My name is Jim Gooch. I live on 69th Street. And right now we have two mines at the end of 69th and 82nd. And the trucks are there now. But I don't think that's the purpose that you need to look at this point in time. It's an administrative permit. That's why we would request the moratorium, is so you can rethink and relook at how you permit and what you permit for these applications. If it is an administrative permit and you think that that's fine, that the neighbors aren't notified that a permit is in process and what the effects of that permit might be. The reason it isn't against wild turkey as much as it is against the process that we currently have in place. And what you need to do is rethink the process that we have and put a process in place that allows the future generations to enjoy or not enjoy the property that we have. And I think the people here, we will back you, for sure, you 5 people, we will back you if there is an issue with what happens with wild turkey mine. We're behind you on that, so don't let the threats of their operation make you feel insecure about where you're headed, because we're behind you all the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Honey Manous. I live in the city of Vero Beach. I'm president of the Indian River Neighborhood Association. We'd like to go on record at this time that we fully support a moratorium on mining in our entire county. We feel that this is going to provide staff and the advisory committees time to reevaluate the regulations that govern where these types of activities are appropriate. There's powerful arguments by the people here about their lives, about the lands and the environment, about our water supply, among many of the matters. These are arguments that say that mining activity is not compatible and not appropriate in certain areas. They're important arguments, and they really have to be listened to. Any decision that is made on this matter is going to absolutely affect our county, the quality of our lives, not only for ourselves, but for future generations. Any decision on mining that is done in haste, what do we say? We're going to repent in leisure. Please vote for this moratorium, and please do reevaluate these regulations. Thank you.
Next.
I'm John Sanders at 2146 20th Avenue. This is not about a green county or how long your family's had land here. This is about being responsible. The very house that each of you will go home to tonight is constructed from material from this type of mine. The asphalt roads that we travel every day are constructed from material that is extracted from this type of mine. It seems hypocritical to vote against the mine that supplies you with the very material that you will drive home tonight. I received a request for proposal the other day at the office, and I think it's very fitting for this meeting. The bid name is the Emergency Dune Restoration at Con Beach, and the scope of work reads as follows. Work under this contract includes furnishing all labor, materials, tools, equipment, supervision, services, and incidental necessities to place beach-compatible sand on Con Beach following the erosion due to the tropical storm Noel. Where does this material come from? Does it grow in trees? No. This material comes from the very mines that we're discussing here today. Don't kid yourself. This is not a 6-month moratorium. This is the first step in stopping all mining that will reflect in your tax dollar. Municipal projects such as schools, administration buildings, road improvement, beach restoration will see immediate and drastic increases in cost if this material has to be trucked or railed in. Already high taxes will continue to increase to pay for it, not in my backyard attitude. And Indian River County has a responsibility to supply its own resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Commissioners and staff. My name is Ital Verone. My address is 280 Pepper Tree Drive. I live in Indian River Shores. There will be many statements and restatements tonight of the issue. The issue is very clear. We are disturbing the lives of a already in place settlement. People live there. Their lives will be disturbed for 10 years. The opposition argues that 6 months might be too long. How about a year? Is that too long when you measure that against the consequence of 10 years of vibration, 10 years of trucks running by your road, the peace, the quiet? I don't think so. But rather than really dealing with the specific issues, I'd like to go back a little bit in history. Many that come here that might oppose the idea of a moratorium also spoke in 2003 when then chairman of the commission, Caroline Ginn, brought up what she called an interim moratorium on development. Its purpose was to pause, take a look at the impact of development upon our community, and create the kind of regulations that could cope with that. Well, that did not pass, as you know. But in Martin County, they did pass a moratorium. And if you look today at the Treasure Coast, we're all in a world of hurt. But the one that comes out best in terms of the inventory of houses, the economy, the employment is where? Martin County. Now, I think what we're asking for is your approval of a moratorium that might last 6 months and, yes, might even last a year. But it's a time to pause to improve the lives of everyone, including the mine operators, everyone that lives in Indian River County. Please pass this moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take one more, and then we'll have to pause for a break. We have captioning every 90 minutes. We have to take a 10 minutes break. Next. Oh, well, maybe we're through.
Okay.
Dale Simchek, 766 South Easy Street. I don't come before you as a city council, but as a single council person, and that's a citizen. The attorney had spoke about the gem and what he believes is the gem, and that is a beautiful area over on 82nd Avenue, but I do not live anywhere near that. I consider the gem of the county the estuaries, the South Prong, the river, and the lagoon, and a woman before me did speak about that. Another woman spoke about creating balance. She was not for the moratorium. Can you ensure balance now with your regulations and with your ordinances? Can you ensure balance to the citizens? I think the moratorium is time to create and develop frontline regulatory procedures. Your procedures as a regulatory agency, not FDEP, not St. John's, not Sebastian Water District, but the county becoming a regulatory agency. I don't feel that they can ensure that right now. Time to improve on procedures for testing and monitoring of wells, and done by the county, not the developer. Time to review your procedures. That's what the moratorium should be, time for that. Implementation of procedures to properly notify any and all cities that receive direct discharge into their bodies of water. I'm more concerned with surface water. Surface water moves laterally. We need to prevent pollution. We're not sure how we're going to prevent surface water from moving and polluting. We need to develop a sense of security in that area. We need time to develop ordinances such as all material or aggregate mine to remain in the county. How about that? There's other counties that have that ordinance. You could explore that. This would be time for you to review that. Citizens that live nearby have concerns about their quality of life. I'm speaking more of a pollution prevention plans, ordinances to protect. This is time to review and improve. The solution to pollution is prevention. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break. This meeting back to order, please. Thank you. You'll take your seats. As we begin the second half, we would like everyone please to start lining up because we don't want to wait to the very end and then everybody wants to speak. So as you take your next at the podiums, everybody line up so we can see how much longer this is going to take. And we'll start over here and then here. Come on down. And the rest of you line up on each side that want to speak. Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. Tom Cowan. My address is 2125 82nd Avenue Southwest. I'm president of Fly-In Ranches Homeowners Association. We would urge that you vote on a 6-month moratorium for the new mining permits to be issued while we study the effects of a number of different things. I think one of the most critical factors has already been mentioned many times tonight, and that's the water quality and the effect that rock mines and sand mines, especially the deep excavation type, which are somewhat new to our area. And this is what most of the new mining permits are being asked for. We are very concerned about our water tables in our area, especially because all the homes in our area are on wells and septic tanks, so this is crucial. We would like to know who is going to be responsible if the wells do go dry in our area. Is this going to be something that we're going to play tag with between the commission, St. John's, the developers? As homeowners, we would like to have some kind of answers to those questions, and that's one of the reasons we would ask for a mining moratorium. The other issues is I think a lot of people brought up wild turkey at the last two meetings, but I think, as one lady said, it's really been the crux of a lot of people being concerned about these issues throughout the county because of the large effects it has throughout the county, not just on the area of wild turkey, but there's 4 such mines that are already asking for permits that will have the same effect on their areas. And I think when you look through the regulations and rules that we have for sand mines in this county, there virtually are very few. And one of the crucial things, I think, is the fact that we don't even notify the people in their areas when we have one of these sand mine applications go out. People don't even know about it until they hear about it through the grapevine. And that's something that needs to be changed. I think the people in any of these areas that are going to be vastly affected for a 10-year period ought to be advised of what's happening in their area. I'm a little confused by this notice that went out in the Press Journal talking about the notice on public hearing mining moratorium ordinance that takes effect, and it lists all the shaded areas where this is supposed to go into effect. At the time of both the planning and zoning meeting when they voted on the moratorium in favor of it, and at the last commission meeting on the moratorium, one of the applicants that had a mining permit in has since apparently been approved, or so we're told. And we're just wondering how that can happen when all this was put into effect before any new mining permits were issued. So we'd like some kind of clarification on the Fisher mine, on has a permit been issued or is it part of the moratorium? And we would certainly urge you to consider this moratorium for at least 6 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Madam Chairman.
Yes.
At our last hearing, I think Mr. Dill came and represented the situation of this Fisher mine as having been approved last spring, subject to about 17 conditions, maybe 19, and he went through a litany of everything that had been approved. The only thing outstanding was the bonds to guarantee compliance with the site plan and reclamation of the site. Those bonds were in place before the effective date of the moratorium, so that is considered to be one of the existing operating mines and wouldn't be impacted by the moratorium.
Thank you. Next.
I am Matt Thornton at 2390 80th Court. I'd just like to say that I've heard a few comments that just take me back, not to mention the threats and allegations of threats and how much money that this is going to cost us and that sort of thing. I think that's kind of cheap. But a couple of things I've heard is the risk of living in a rural area. I moved here about 7 years ago, and I can't believe that someone would say that just because I live in a rural area that I'm taking more of a risk than living in either a city or what would be called an urban area. That's just unfathomable. Also, I'd like to know what kind of impact blasting is going to have on my area. We're only about a mile away from this mine. My house is literally going to be vibrating. What is that going to have? What kind of an impact is that going to have on my foundation of my home? Am I going to wake up and find my home falling into a hole? I'm just, kind of worried about that. Property value, trucking expansion, safety, environmental, all that has to be considered here, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
Let's not fight over this, Jess. Joseph Paladin. I'm the president of Black Swan Consulting and Entitlement Corporation, and I'm a consultant on the Wild Turkey Mine project. Having said that, I've been at quite a few of these meetings, and I think one of the last meetings I was at, I made a statement that a lady got up and corrected me on. I said, listen, we're all on the same side here. We're all trying to work for the same thing. And she said, Mr. Paladin, we're not on the same side. We don't want the mine. You do want the mine. So I stand corrected. She was right and I was wrong. But what I meant to say was we should all be on the same side. Because I think if we all work together, we can get a whole lot more out of this than working against each other. Having said that, let me go ahead and talk a little bit about the LDRs. Number one, the LDRs for mining, 934, we worked on those for well over a year, rewriting them, adding LDRs to Chapter 934, making sure they incorporated some of the complaints that we had over the last year or so. And we've done that. We worked very hard to write those LDRs. But they were just put in effect about 90 days ago or so. We really haven't had a chance to even attach those LDRs to any current mining procedures or any current mining permits that have been approved. They're so new. And I went back and pulled all the complaints on 82nd Avenue and on some of the other mining projects over the last 2 years. And actually, if you took all those complaints and laid them out, we have an LDR already on our books that we could attach to each one of those complaints. So if we had enforcement issues, possibly, but our LDRs, our LDRs are in pretty good shape. We could go ahead and attach every complaint we've had to an LDR we have in place already. We just need to find out how to fine-tune and maybe enforce these LDRs. And as far as speaking for Wild Turkey, let me explain. We brought forth at the first public meeting, I believe, 11 proposals that we asked to be attached to our permit, and we would legally abide by those proposals as long as we could keep going through the system. Those proposals, one of those proposals, a gentleman just asked about explosives. Absolutely no explosives on site. Absolutely no explosives can be used on site. I mean, a lot of the proposals we brought forward, we can't make light of them. I think they're very serious, and I think they're quite extraordinary to bring forth what we've asked, what we've volunteered to do, as far as taking care of 82nd Avenue, as far as the full-time traffic cop, enforcing the laws and the speed and making sure that it is safer for the people that live out there. Our site would never look like the site on Indio Road. Our site would never look like the sites down in Miami that we got pictures of, and I pulled that 178-page report also and looked at it. Under our current mining procedures, we can only mine 20 acres at a time. Until that 20 acres is mined and it's put back and the county approves it, we can't go on to mine the next 20 acres. So there's never any more than 20 acres at a time we're dewatering. And the water will be kept on site, by the way, because of the new mining procedures that have been adapted in the past year or so. And most of the harsh effects you've seen on the water and the aquifer have been where they've taken water and shipped it off-site. We're going to be monitoring those wells on a monthly basis. Those reports will be brought back to the county. We're going to do everything we can to try and be good neighbors and work within the system. It's not that we want to go in there and ruin the land and ruin the environment and hurt the other people around us. We would like to try and make this better. We're not asking to be exempt from anything when we spoke last time. We're saying that, as it was discussed a month or so ago, to go through unparalleled tracks. Let the moratorium go forth if you decide to have the moratorium, which because all the complaints and everything that we're trying to adjust to, we have LDRs in place already, it doesn't really seem that a moratorium is something we need. It seems like maybe we need to tune up our enforcement levels and how we're going to enforce the laws we have. And I understand doing that. But we would like to work with y'all as the moratorium goes forward. If you decide to do that, or if you don't decide to do it, we still like to work with y'all. If we have to be a guinea pig, that's fine. If we have to wait 2 weeks longer to get something processed, or if we have to wait 2 months longer to get something processed, as long as we're still working to see where we're going, we can live with all that if it's going to make a better outcome at the end. We have no problem working with you during the procedure. We're just trying not to be stopped, period, and not be able to add to your input. Again, we have certified hydrologists, environmentalists, traffic reports, etc., by certified people. We have at least 2 reports in every one of those fields that were submitted to the county and are in process of adding to if the county asks for more information. If you have to hire an outside hydrologist on your own to analyze our reports, that's up to you all. That's fine. We have no problem with that. If we have to wait for you to do that, we have no problem with that either. We would welcome that. I don't know how many people have seen our hydrology reports that we've submitted, but I'd like to read the part of one for you, the conclusion page, if I might. It's only a paragraph. It'll take a very short period of time. And it says here, conclusions. Based on the site plans by Schulke, Biddle, and Stoddard, that's our engineers, our personal survey of the site, and the 3 carefully developed reports on specific aspects of the proposed project, my review and analysis of these documents, and including my own experience encompassing some 53 years of professional experience, including 34 years of hydrology and water resource management experience in South Florida, and which includes a number of sand mine projects in South Florida, mainly in Indian River County. I would conclude that it is my professional opinion that the project as described in the reports and the summary included herein would have no adverse impacts on the water resources of the area. In fact, it would significantly enhance them. Have no adverse impact on flora and fauna and wildlife. In fact, it would enhance their occurrence upon completion of the mining project, and would be a significant enhancement to the county-owned conservation area immediately to the east, because it would add a water environment and a habitat which the conservation area lacks. I can therefore highly recommend that this project be approved. Now, that's from a hydrologist, and we have a second hydrologist report that we've submitted. And I know that last time I read that, Commissioner O'Brien said that, how much validity does it have? Because, you guys paid for that. Every report that's ever been submitted to the county on traffic, hydrology, environmentalists, has always been paid for by the person that was bringing it forward, because they should have the expense. If you all want to have your own hydrologist, your outside hydrologist, analyze the reports, we're perfectly fine with that. We welcome that. We have no problem. But it's the owner's job to pay for the reports we submit. So I don't think that we should make light of that. But all these reports we submitted are professionally done by certified professional people, and they're submitted to your county for review. If you want to step outside and get somebody to review those, we're okay with that too. But what we're saying is I don't think that a moratorium is going to solve the problem. I think what will solve the problem of the complaints I've seen is to better enforce the LDRs we have, and maybe we got to reword some of the LDRs we have. And going through the process, if you all want to do that, we're willing to submit to that, going through the process, and help you, see how they would apply to a specific project, more or less, like I said, being a guinea pig, sort of, and actually seeing what a site would actually do with these LDRs attached to it. That could all be a benefit to y'all, not a negative. And we're willing to offer that expertise and help out any way we can, but we really don't recommend a moratorium and don't think a moratorium would be in the best interest of the people. I think in the best interest of the people, we don't mind slowing down and going through the process and taking a little bit longer if that's what it takes. I'd like for you to take that in consideration when you think about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Jens Tripson, 2525 14th Street, Vero Beach. I'm here tonight as First Vice President of Pelican Island Audubon Society. I'd like to say Happy New Year to you all.
Happy New Year to you, Jens.
Thank you for your email. Happy New Year, Wesley, Christmas. I agree with Joe that we all need to work together on this. We're going to have mines of various sizes, shapes, and species. And it seems to me that a moratorium is a really good solution, at least 6 months for us to look at where we might want to have mines, what the impacts will be, whether it's a urban or suburban or rural area, what the impacts on the water and the environment will be, what the impacts on the roads will be. And it just seems like that this is a good way to go, and we strongly urge you to vote in favor of a moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Let's line up, please. I see both sides.
Hi, I'm Karen Phillips. I live at 6855 West 82nd Avenue. I live right on the very corner of 82nd Avenue and 69th Street. We have 2 sand mines operating in our vicinity right up the street right now, and everybody's talking about all these rules and regulations that are in force, and I don't know how many times I've had to call Mr. Davis because the regulations are not enforced. These people do not, the sand mines that are in existence right now do not even bother unless they're being brought to the forefront to go by what the rules are and regulations are. I keep having to call him, and that's the only time. I know we're whiners, we're known as whiners, but we have to whine. We have to say something here. And I'm very upset right now hearing Mr. Paladin say, no, we need to go forward and use them as guinea pigs when no one is even bothering to go by the rules and regulations that are set forth right now in the 2 mining operations that are out on 82nd. We wake up every morning to the sounds of trucks at 6 a.m. coming by our house, lining up to go to the mines. Last Friday morning it was raining and there were trucks running from the mines by 6:15 a.m. I didn't call you because you hear from me so much. This is just me, one resident. I live in Two Bridges Equestrian Center. We listen to these trucks hit this corner. There's holes. They're saying pave the road. Well, the real road, which we've been told by Mr. Baird, is 60 feet to the east of it in an orange grove. And so we're trying to deal with pavement meeting sand, and we've got people saying they want to add more traffic to this road, and then we try to get out on 66, which is already covered with traffic. I sat behind a truck the other day trying to make a right-hand turn, a dump truck trying to make a right-hand turn for 15 minutes onto 66th Avenue. Please, this moratorium needs to be looked into. You need to take the time to investigate this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Jonathan Ferguson. I'm an attorney. My office is in 145 Northwest Central Park Plaza in Port St. Lucie, Florida, and I do represent Wild Turkey, and I will keep my comments brief because I know it's getting late. A couple things as I sat through, again, all the public comments. What really strikes me, and I think Mr. Paladin brought it out, is that the rules are in place, and as the woman who just spoke said, they're not being enforced. The moratorium doesn't get you there. The moratorium simply delays the inevitable. I think that the Commission obviously has a very difficult decision tonight. If it was simply a public referendum way of operating, it would be easy, but it's not. You have a lot of issues that you need to balance. I don't know if it was mentioned, but I believe that the State Aggregate Task Force is meeting tomorrow in Miami. again, a follow-up to their Tampa meeting, and I have been told that they are watching the results of this meeting tonight, and like it or not, Indian River County may end up being a poster child for the problems, perceived problems at the state level of leaving local control over what is recognized to be a state issue. So you may get more notoriety than you wish. Someone brought up the balancing of property rights and the fact that the parties purchase a property to develop it. And I assume when they meant develop it, they meant develop it for residential use. Obviously, I don't think anyone would be opposed to developing it for agricultural use, or at least they would perceive it not to be a problem. However, your current regulations and rules allow the property to be used for mining. And that is one of the key issues, and I will bring you back to one of the opening comments by Mr. Collins. And I was trying to keep a tally of the public who spoke, those who were simply in favor of the moratorium, and those who were very candid and very open and said, do not allow the wild turkey mine. And there are those that spoke tonight, and I think Mr. Collins was very clear in saying that that is not an option. You currently allow mining. You have to live with that fact that those property rights exist. So the best that we can all hope for, other than maybe myself, because if we get into litigation, I'll personally benefit, but as a community, the best you can hope for is to work with the property owner to best address the issues that are raised here tonight. A moratorium doesn't get you there. All of the issues that are raised, almost all of them, except for the notice issue, and I would suggest that the notice has been taken care of as far as the wild turkey mine. And you may want to amend your ordinances so you have a better notice procedures, but I don't think that's any longer an issue in this case. All of the other issues cannot be addressed by the moratorium. They cannot be addressed by the LDRs because they are case specific. Whether or not the wild turkey mine has an impact on the water table, you will not know until you have experts look at the data. A moratorium doesn't get you there. Amending the LDRs doesn't get you there. Whether conditions can be imposed that to the best extent possible addresses traffic, you won't know by a moratorium, and you won't know by amending the LDRs. Your LDRs are in place now. It is strictly a case-by-case analysis as the applications come forward. So in my opinion, the moratorium is simply a red herring. It is tried to delay this, to move it out, hoping that the developer either, as I believe Mr. Lemon stated, gets tired, goes away, finds something else to focus their energy on. Let me suggest to you that what is at stake here is far more valuable than another residential subdivision where that may be the case. There is too much at stake here for this property owner to simply walk away. Let me suggest that the best course of action is not what I would submit is a waste of time with a moratorium where everybody simply spins their wheels thinking that they're going to achieve something positive. Rather, it would be to spend more time, to direct staff to take more time in reviewing the specifics of the wild turkey mine. Again, if there's other minor tweaking of the LDR so that there's a better notice provision, fine, go for it. I don't think that's any longer an issue. Finally, I know people take offense. I know elected officials take offense when they get threatened. I've been doing this a very long time. I've never figured out how to sugarcoat a threat. I apologize to the public if they took offense by the threats. What we are simply trying to provide the commission, who has to ultimately make the decision, and at the same time inform the public, is the reality. The business decisions that you are being faced with and the decisions that you have to make have consequences. Yes, those are threats. I won't say that, no, we're not threatening you, but if you do this, we're going to sue you. But that's not a threat. Candidly, it's a threat. But it is simply the process. You make decisions, we have to make decisions. Our decisions are based on business decisions and our best course of action. If you make a decision that we feel leaves us no choice but to protect our rights, which is to file suit, then so be it. We'll go through the process. We would rather not do that. However, you need the full information to understand the full ramifications of what your decisions will be, which is why I provided Mr. Collins with our legal opinion as to our rights and the consequences of granting the moratorium and applying it to our project, and ultimately adopting LDRs that attempt to shut down the ability to operate a mine on this property. He has our legal opinion. He can evaluate it. He's a very competent attorney. He can advise you in private as to the pros and cons of our arguments. However, it is also important that the public understand what our legal positions are, which is why Mr. Evans went through and laid it out for you. So, yes, it's a threat. It's not meant to be offensive. I apologize to the public if they take it that way, but they need to know what your decisions are based on, the tax dollar consequences of your decisions, whether or not ultimately there are damages. There are expenses and costs to litigation for both sides. We weigh it, you weigh it. You need to factor that into your decision. What we are asking you, as Mr. Paladin stated, if you feel you need a moratorium to prevent any new applications from coming forward so you can take another look at your LDRs, then so be it, that's fine. However, we feel that during this 6 months that you're looking at that, for purposes of the wild turkey mine, everyone's time would be better spent working on the details and the process and the conditions that would make that project as palatable to the public as possible and as much of an asset to the community as possible within all of the rules that we have to live by. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Happy New Year, Commissioners. David Cox, 9495 Periwinkle Lane. I want to speak to two issues. One is the use of the moratorium, and the second is the threat. And the first, it seems that the way this possible moratorium is being cast is that it could only be used for, excuse me, I shouldn't be that close. It should only be used for tweaking LDRs, which, as Mr. Paladin pointed out, we just got finished with that process. But I would like to make the observation that when we did go through the process of amending the LDRs, the Chapter 934, the mining LDRs, it wasn't with an eye towards the broader context of the permittable land uses in Ag 1, Ag 2, and Ag 3. It was much more microscopic. We were dealing with dotting I's and crossing T's, raising the bar, trying to improve specifics. It was not with an eye towards the incursions into the ag land of residential development and the inevitable consequences of conflicting or incompatible land uses generated by those changes. And I think changing LDRs is not the only outcome that a 6-month moratorium could have. That would bring us to July, which is one of the 2 windows for changing comp plans. It might be that we would want to look at the underlying land uses permitted in Ag 1 and ask some serious questions that are broader questions than would be addressed just in the LDRs. And so for that reason, I think that that makes sense to take this breather and use the moratorium wisely. And that brings me to the second point, the threat. And I've mentioned this before, your predecessors were threatened by suits from the FCC when we didn't want to place a cell tower next to a preschool in the ag lands. And we were told by the FCC lawyers from Washington that you had to do it. Indian River County had no choice. And fortunately, we went ahead and held our ground, invoked a moratorium on cell towers, which lasted for, I believe, 2 years. We developed a telecommunications master plan for the county, which is still guiding the placement of our cell towers. We actually came out of that moratorium process with a far better plan than we would have gotten incrementally if we had just gone project by project by project. So we used that time wisely. It took some gumption on the part. I mean, there were threats issued then. I mean, they were not veiled. And as a consequence now, when you drive into Indian River County from either the south or the north on I-95, you don't see a forest of cell towers when you cross our county line. We are co-locating cell towers on publicly owned properties. We've taken a pretty wise approach, and I think that we can do the same thing here by working together. And I would like to ask you to support the request for a moratorium and to direct staff. And I don't know what sort of process would be initiated by the moratorium. I think that needs to be defined. Who would participate in the ongoing discussions, the advisement, and how would that be crafted? But I think that as a first step, you need to vote for that moratorium tonight. I would appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. Excuse me. Tim Glover. I'm president of the Friends of St. Sebastian River. And I'm certainly...
Address, please.
My address is 9660 Estuary Way, Sebastian.
Thank you.
I'm not an expert on mining, certainly, but my understanding is that we have a proposed new type of mining for the county. And I'm also concerned that that proposed mine is located adjacent to the Lateral Sea Canal, which is in the St. Sebastian River, excuse me, the Sebastian River Water Control District, and drains to the south prong of the St. Sebastian River. So I think the opportunity that we have here with a moratorium is to take a look at do we have the processes and restrictions in place that are appropriate to allow for a new type of mining in this county. So I think that it would be advantageous to do that, to take the time for a moratorium, to make sure that the LDRs or whatever the processes that are required are appropriate for a new type of mining in this county. So we would encourage you to support a moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. We're finished. Let's hurry.
Good evening. My name is Jim Gallagher. I live at 766 Holden Avenue in Sebastian, and I thank you for taking the time to listen to me and everyone else, and also for your patience. The last time I was here, my wife, my daughter had called up to say she'd just gotten engaged, and before I left, she was talking tonight to me about the time when she's going to get married and trying to pick dates. So I'm hoping that we can solve all of this and get out of here by the time that her wedding's going to take place. I think it's going to be July. Okay. Anyway, in listening to both sides again, listening to all kinds of discussions and arguments and experts and things, and there are a number of things that, again, I was sitting there and I have just observed. First of all, I worked in a bureaucracy until I retired. And bureaucracy is, of course, one of their, like any living thing, its job is to maintain itself. And bureaucracies tend to like to expand, and they like to hire more people. And the people on top, therefore, get higher wages because they've got more people that they oversee. So I would just take that into mind when we talk about the Florida Department of Transportation, which, of course, does want to expand. It has a job to do. But like developers, they seem to work hand in hand. And I think we have to keep that in consideration. And I also want to point out that in reading the judge's report, and I only read parts of it from the South Florida decision, and I don't know if that was missing from the person from the Florida Department of Transportation's readings, but there was specific reference to benzene in the water supply of South Florida. And there was enough suspicion as to where that had come from, and that was from the mining areas, that caused him to create the decision of 170 some odd pages. So it was just not a case of following procedures, it was also a case of them finding something that was extremely damaging and poisonous within the water supply. Okay, so I just wanted to clear that up. Also, I coached high school basketball for a number of years, and when things went wrong, as they often did, or just when you suspected things weren't going the way you wanted things to go, and your kids were starting to get confused or upset, you called a timeout. Any decent coach calls a timeout when he knows it's necessary. Right now, you're in a position of being coaches, in addition to being council members. If you feel that a timeout is necessary, and with all of the discussion back and forth here and the opposing views, how could you not be confused? How would you not know which side has better evidence or more scientific evidence? Take the time, please. This is a decision that's not only going to affect us and developers and the miners and agriculture, it's going to affect generations to come that are going to live here in this beautiful area. Another thing that I thought I heard was when Mr. Collins read the letter that he received from the representative of the Florida Department of Transportation. It referred to the fact that they anticipated the loss of 20% of aggregate from the Miami-Dade court decision. I think that's what I heard. And also if the Court of Appeals decision was upheld. Now, it specifically said due to things like health, welfare, and environmental issues. And they were worried that they were going to lose that 20% of aggregate. If they're worried that they're losing that 20% of aggregate because the court decision might be upheld on appeal, then they recognize that there must be some good reason for that court decision in the first place. Namely, not only the problems that may occur within the mining area in residential sections, but also the problems with benzene again. So if it's dangerous and it's too dangerous for this to continue in South Florida, why do it here? Why not take the time to correct the problem if it exists? It's only a little bit of time, and I think both sides should be willing, if you are reasonable and other people are reasonable, what is 6 months in relation to what could happen in the long run? Okay, especially for people who live here. Not everybody concerned with this problem is going to be living here and facing it for years to come. I please ask you to represent your people on both sides. Consider the importance of development within the area. Consider the importance of highways, but consider what's going to happen in the future and how you'll be thought of and what your endowment to the future will be. Also, the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. Again, if the South Florida decision and the Bacchus report describing benzene poisoning and aquifer contamination and water loss are even partially right, okay, wouldn't it be insane to continue doing things in the same way if that's the result of doing it this way? Anyway, to me it would be insane to allow this to happen, much less to expand it. I don't have anything against the wild turkey mine. In fact, one of the other speakers, I always thought of wild turkey also as something as you sat down around and, could we get the game back on and open a bottle and maybe we could solve this much more quickly. But anyway, I know I would. If you can, please. I know I'm the last speaker. I assume I'm the last speaker. And I'm just summing up for my daughter and when those grandchildren come back down here. 6 months is not a long time out of anybody's life. Profits can increase. Interest can be gotten on money. Please take the time to consider everybody's problem, but consider what might happen if you don't take up a moratorium for a short period of time and what the future could be damaged by. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? It's the last call.
Good evening. I'm Craig Howdeshell, registered professional engineer, state of Florida, state of Colorado. I'd like to address a few points.
Can we have your address, please?
Yes. My address is 8018 Southeast Sugar Pines Way, Hope Sound. That's in Martin County. Martin County has some very restrictive rules that have killed competition in the aggregate mining business and have driven cost of construction. I just want that to be brought to light and see if that is what Indian River County is looking to have happen. I understand that there is a couple of mine permits that have been extended, have been renewed, and that the moratorium will not take place upon top of those renewed mine permits. So my point is that by putting a moratorium into place, stopping current mine permits on a countywide basis, you are going to limit competition and drive cost. The gentleman before me talked about benzene in the water in the Miami-Dade Lake Belt decision in District 11 court. That indeed is a fact that the judge brought forward in that decision. But that's my point. My point is that was a very specific decision. It was a very specific chemical in a very specific case. Benzene is a byproduct of several different types of petroleum products, of toluene being one of them. The chances of that happening in the natural environment in the mines in Indian River County is very slim to none. I also have read the Backus report on two different occasions. The Backus report was a survey that was done for a professional organization out of Boulder, Colorado. When I was a grad student at Colorado State University, I read that paper the first time, and I have recently read it again. With being a survey paper, the point is that it's a very general in nature. It doesn't address any specifics about Indian River County per se. It splits the state of Florida into very large regions and provides very little scientific evidence as to the causes and conditions of groundwater flow in any specific region of the state. It doesn't address drawdown of groundwater, which brings me to the situation with specifically the Wild Turkey Estates proposal. There's two aquifers out there. There is the Floridan aquifer, which is a drinking water aquifer in that part of the county, and then a surficial or a surface water aquifer. The waters that will be removed to allow the mining to take place in a very restricted area on a 20-acre time-by-time basis is going to provide very little water that will be discharged either into a perimeter ditch on site and then basically become recycled, if you will. As the water it goes into the ditch, then that water will once again be recycled, and it will become more or less a perimeter boundary that will allow off-site groundwaters to remain at the level that they are. So these knee-jerk reaction, non-scientific arguments about the drawdown of the groundwater are not correct. The situation about the benzene being the driver, the environmental decision maker for what happened with the case in Miami-Dade is incorrect. And I've heard time and time again this evening, many people stand up here and speak directly against the Wild Turkey Estates LLC proposal, as opposed to speaking about mining in the state, or excuse me, mining in the county in a general sense. I've been fortunate during my career to work in many, many counties and many, many states across this wonderful country. I myself have helped write land development regulations, and what I've seen be successful is something that I haven't even heard anyone talk about tonight, which is allowing a discussion to take place about changing your existing land development regulations or the research into the modification thereof while existing permits move forward instead of imposing a moratorium. And that's what I'm going to suggest you try to do. I'm going to suggest that you direct staff to move into a situation where they are continuing to look at your land development regulations, continuing to do research about how not only places in Florida handle mining, but in other parts of the country for new ideas, while the existing proposals march forward, in the event that the outcome is that indeed those existing proposals that are already in process, do benefit the county, do benefit the state of Florida, and are demonstrated as being worthy in environmental situations as well as economic situations. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Second time? Okay, let's come forward if you're going to speak. We're going to wrap this up because we have other...
Charles Kramer, 10729 US 1 Sebastian. This will only take a minute. I just need a clarification. And on the proposed moratorium, the way I understood one of the conditions from P&Z, or one of the recommendations for exemptions, was on the annual renewal for all mining permits that occurs in September and October of each year. And I believe Mr. Collins made mention of that in the beginning of the meeting in his comments, and I just want a clarification on that. Or existing mines exempt from new regulations during and after the moratorium?
When an existing mine comes in to renew its operating permit, that can go forward and be processed. That typically occurs around October of each year. If the moratorium is approved in July, we would have to look at the outcome of the recommendations and see if it made sense to apply any new conditions to the mines that were already operating or not. I don't know what these regulations can be, so who knows whether it would be appropriate to apply them or not. But if an operating mine was in default of its operating conditions at the time of renewal, that might be the basis not to extend them without applying new conditions to them. But that's all speculating what we're going to come out as an end result with, what kind of regulations there might be. Is it or is it not appropriate to apply them to already existing mines? Would the existing miners see it in the public interest to cooperate or not? But as far as the basic question, the prohibition against issuing mining permits does not apply to renewal of operating permits for existing mines.
Yeah, okay. I'm just curious, and the reason I say that is some of your conditions that might be imposed on new mines, if they carried over to existing mines, may literally legislate them right out of business. So at this point in time, that's an unknown to us. And when we come back for a permit renewal, which is usually, they're virtually automatic, as we know that, how would we know that we wouldn't have these new regulations imposed on us?
At this point, you don't, but I think the obligation of the Commission is to operate in a fundamentally fair manner and not change the game on you such that an existing approval has the rug pulled out from under it. If there's some means to incorporate a suggestion that makes a lot of sense to everybody, including the existing operators, I think that's something that could be addressed when we know what those suggestions are. If it's something that works to the point it would be detrimental, and your existing operation already permitted would be shut down, I think you'd have a strong case that fairness would require you to be allowed to continue under the rules that were in place when you were approved.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, anybody else? Yes. Please come forward.
Takes me this long to get my courage up. My name is Martha Ridner. I live at 9 River Oak Drive in San Sebastian Springs, Sebastian, Florida, right along the San Sebastian Preserve. Also, my family owns 100 acres across the street from Treasure Hammock with horses and cattle. First, I would like to say that Treasure Hammock Ranch is, everyone knows the Sexton Ranch, but is a true treasure. I spend all my non-working time at my property across the street and enjoy the wildlife, bald eagles, etc. daily. I was approached about a year and a half ago from a mining group that said, I can make your family rich. They knew there were coquina in that area. Obviously, I feel that we need to do a moratorium to really look at everything to see what is correct to do in this situation, especially with 1,000 acres on Ranch Road for sale. We don't want this to be the next one. Again, please consider the difference of sand and rock mining. When sand mining, the mine uses water to crush the rock, so here now goes more water away. I'm speaking again about rock, not sand mining. If we damage the Florida aquifer, yes, we will need to turn to surface water. The mining operation now says we will have a new 230 acre of lake when they are finished, which would be 10 to 15 years or whatever the time frame is. So now at that time, if we damage the aquifer, will they then want to sell us the water to the county residents? Just recently, there has been a crisis with the loss of water in Lake Okeechobee, as we've all read in the newspaper. This proves that there is a problem out there with groundwater. We need to be careful. It was stated earlier that 80% of the water is in North Florida and 80% of the population is in South Florida. This again justifies further research to protect what we have. Another item to note, the trucks that do haul coquina are much larger trucks than your normal dump trucks. They have more axles, they're heavier, so we need to look at this as a public safety factor as well. Those who talk about the Miami mine shutting down talk lightly about reasons. If you read through the documentation, which is quite lengthy, there are many issues. Yes, the Wild Turkey Mine is a business, and it makes business decisions and will make a lot of money, but my property can decrease in value from this. The most important item out of this whole thing is to look at the long-term effects that the citizens of Indian River County will deal with, public health, safety, and welfare, and that is what counts. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Come on, let's get up.
There you go. Good evening, George Latour, 2332 Vero Beach Avenue, and I have heard the pros and cons, and I request, I guess is the word, from the county commission that they adopt the as approved by the planning just recently with the same conditions, I guess you can call them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Do you want to speak? No one else. Okay, we'll wrap this up. Public hearing closed. Now, at this point, we have staff. We have questions we can ask staff, or we can talk amongst ourselves and then have a motion or two. We'll see how that goes. Will, do you want to add anything to your previous?
I don't want to lengthen the meeting whatsoever.
All right. On your behalf. Does anyone have questions of Will? We'll start at this end. Well, we started at that end. We'll start at your end. Commissioner Wheeler, do you have questions of Will or staff?
The only one, the question's at what point in time, if the moratorium is passed, do we share with staff some of our concerns that we want looked at and perhaps incorporated into the new LDRs during this process of the moratorium?
Bob, please.
I'm Bob Keating. I'm County Community Development Director. We as staff were thinking about coming to you on your meeting of the 15th, a week from tomorrow, with a staff report regarding some proposals about how to go forward, and at that time would be appropriate for the board members to give us any suggestions.
Okay. So it would be regularly scheduled
Yes.
and backup material. Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
And advertised. Commissioner Davis, any questions of staff? Mr.
Not right now.
No, ma'am. Okay, wrap up. Are you any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay, I have two of Will. One being the situation of we've heard going parallel tracks with the permitting process if a moratorium is put in place. What is that situation?
Well, what that would do is leave the moratorium in place on accepting new applications and issuing new permits, but would allow the existing applications that were already filed to move forward and be processed. I don't think that that's a good idea for a couple of reasons. I think that the research and the time investment of the staff in developing better regulations with respect to mining is going to be very intensive, and I think if you have them reviewing existing applications under existing regulations, it could leave the implication that we're inviting the applicants to go ahead, spend money, perform studies, and that could turn around to give rise to a later claim that we induced them in bad faith to make investment, and now we've switched the regulations. I think it would be better to let the staff concentrate on the new regulations and let the applicants that currently have applications on file to come to the table, to the workshops, whatever happens, bring their ideas, their suggestions, and put it into the mix to develop a better end product, which presumably they could live with it at the end of the process, and they would know by the time they got there what the new regulations would apply, how they would apply to them, and shouldn't take that much time to submit an application into compliance with any new regulations. I'm also concerned because if we spend time in a review process, the implication might be that they should go and spend time with a state or water management district in regulatory review, and that could be very expensive, and I'm not sure it's a good idea to put them in that position or put us in the position where they could come back and say, you know, you really led us down the garden path and we don't think it's fair now to apply the new regulations to us. The whole point of including the cessation of processing the applications in the moratorium is to just maintain the status quo with respect to everything and come out with an end product that can be applied to everything we have now, and apply those regulations as they evolve through the next 6 months to the mines that are currently in-house, so to speak.
Okay, staff, anything on that?
Madam Chair.
Okay.
If I could, along those lines, is there a way that we could call it, whenever you, process means working towards a permit. What I view here is as this passes, and if we leave the word processed in there, it sounds to me as if we are giving staff direction, or the county administrator will give staff direction to close these files up, set them to the side, and then let's start working on the LDRs.
That's correct.
The issue that I have with that is we've got so many people out here that brought up some great ideas, and granted, we do have some site-specific applications in front of us. But I think, as a commissioner, I have not had the opportunity to vote for or against a sand mine in my 3 years of being here. Commissioner Wheeler, you may have as a previous commissioner. But not only that, the sand mines that have come before us have all been smaller than the one that we're talking about on 82nd Avenue. We also have several of them that are out in the A2 areas that at the time, Mr. Knight actually had talked about maybe exempting them from this moratorium. I believe the moratorium's in order. There's no doubt in my mind on that. Where I have the issue is we're missing a tremendous opportunity while we take the time out to get a tremendous education with practical experience from the hydrologist reports that's in front of us. And I know this, I say this to be a fact anyhow. My brother's mine, his hydrology report was a paragraph on one page. Now, I know that's not the case for what we're looking at here with the wild turkey situation. So we have the opportunity to learn at the same time we move forward. And I don't think it's wise while we take this time out, while we take this breath, while you take whatever you want to call it, while we do this moratorium. And quite frankly, I'll be the first to admit, I don't think we can get it done in 6 months. I think it's going to be longer than that, and I'm good with that. But I don't think we should stick our head in the sand and tell staff, let's close up these files and not look at them until we get finished.
Well, I think what you're not looking at is the files in terms of site plans, setbacks, et cetera. There may be things that can be gleaned by the reports that have been submitted that can be factored into the discussion about groundwater.
Well, that's my point. That's my point in the way
That's why I say they should come to the table and discuss what is a better end set of regulations during the 6-month period.
I don't think we should close the files on something that's looking at us coming down the tracks. I think we can, this is in my backyard. I want to know what a 200-acre lake is going to do to my well, just like many of you out there. I depend on my well for my drinking water. I don't have municipal services. And to not have the opportunity to have this as one of the most scrutinized mines, especially with it being one of the only coquina mines in east of 95, because we decided to close the files for 6 months. I'm all for taking the time out for 6 months, but I'm not for closing the file for 6 months and us not look at it until we get to the point where they're ready to come through with a permit.
Do I hear anyone else on this frame of thought that Commissioner O'Brien?
Yeah, I think that information is still out there. Anything that's been submitted at this point is public record. I think staff, there's a lot of other counties that have looked at this. We'll be able to get quite a bit of information from the other counties. Lee County is funding a big consultant report. We'll have access to that. I'm sure there'll be several workshops or public hearings when all this information can be brought to us. I think by not processing these applications, we're not closing them to the knowledge. We're just stopping the application process. That information will still be there. And I agree with Attorney Collins that I think it's best that we do have the total moratorium for the 6 months. We'll be able to get these ideas and implement them into the future land use regulations we come up with. But I don't believe it's appropriate to keep applications in the application process while we're going through the moratorium process.
Thank you. Your feeling on this, Commissioner Flesher? What are your feelings on this?
I have nothing to add.
Okay. Commissioner Wheeler.
Well, basically, I agree with Mr. Collins. I think that we leave ourselves more vulnerable if something goes wrong in the future. There's also 3 mining permits, I believe, that all 3 would be left to continue with the program. And I think it puts us in a more vulnerable position if we do come up with something that they don't like at a later date. And I don't see where 6 months is going to make a difference on the mining and whatever happens in the future happens. I don't think 6 months is going to make or break anybody. This property's been sitting there for quite some time, and I think that the permits, because there is 3 of them, I think. Well, I just agree with Mr. Collins. I think it puts us in a more vulnerable position.
Well, we're in the situation, and I do appreciate everyone who came tonight because it was a rainy night and there were other things you could have been doing. And this is the best government when it's the government of the people. And we appreciate you coming, and we did listen. I agree with our attorney. I can't not. He is our attorney. And he states it loudly and clearly that a moratorium is appropriate. And although you, as I understand it, will not be voting on a moratorium because of your declaring of your brother's mining interest,
Like to make a motion?
the rest of us would be. But I do appreciate your putting yourself on the line and not avoiding the situation and making a declaration of what your thoughts are. In the conversation we had, you had, as I understand it, you wish to put out there that the process not completely stop but slow down?
It's not that, we don't even have to call it processed. All I'm after is the information in those files to be able to access it so we can make good LDRs. And if you want to call it something other than that, I know it sounds like moving a permit along. It's not that. It's as much as I just asked Will the question. With the way we have this written right here, that means they're going to close those files, set them aside, and then start working on other issues because they've been given direction by this board. Unless Will's going to change his mind, but he just said that was a yes, and I just think that this is too big of an issue for the residents off of 82nd Avenue not to be able to have some specifics instead of abstract information to be able to rely upon to change the LDRs.
Let me circle back in on what Commissioner O'Brien said. The information's there. It's public record. If it's beneficial to developing better regulations, it can be used. It's just that the staff will utilize that information to get better regulations, not to move the existing projects forward under the existing regulations, which may be considered deficient.
Okay.
Mr. Collins?
Yes,
Madam Chair?
yes.
I believe with, if I interpret it correctly, is Commissioner Davis is bringing out the possibility of closing the lines of communication, and I do share that concern that by enacting a full-flavor moratorium, we might prohibit staff from being able to discuss very important, beneficial, key elements that will serve the public. We do serve for the greater good of all the public at large. Thank you, Mr. Gettles. But we dare take the risk of ending any discussion for some of the strong key recommendations that have come out that we've heard in previous meetings, and I don't necessarily know if those suggestions will be available to us up the road. We may take the risk of losing an opportunity that has been given to us to at least during the time of the off-season to be able to look at the rules carefully with input from all avenues.
I think we invite everyone to come to the table, including the developers of mines who have expertise, experts that can contribute to the conversation. The intent is not to say you shouldn't be part of the process. I think they need to be part of the process if we're going to get a good result.
Well, I just want to place that on record that I do share that concern that there might be a limitation, prohibition for staff contact in order to ensure that a lot of the recommendations that have been discussed, however valid they may or may not be, might be limited, and you're assuring that that's not the case.
I'm assuring you that the staff is in no way limited in talking to the applicants about what would be better land development regulations, whether their site applications are moving forward or not.
Commissioner Wheeler has a question for staff.
I just wanted to ask staff, along with Will, I've got Will's position, but do you see any advantage to continuing the process of the permit while we go through a moratorium, or do you see a disadvantage to that and taking time away from coming up with a solution and having whatever necessary workshops, whatever we need to come up with the solution that we're looking for?
I think Will is correct. We're gonna have a lot of work to do to try to analyze all the information. identify the issues, have the public participation process, and deal with changes to the LDRs. I really don't see any advantages to moving any projects along as we do the work associated with the moratorium.
Commissioner?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify with Will and regarding Commissioner Flesher's concerns about communication. Since this is a change in law, it's considered legislative, is that correct?
Yes.
And so therefore, not only can staff speak to the individuals, but we as individual commissioners are free to discuss these with potential mine applicants.
Yes.
So there's no restriction on communication whatsoever.
Except between you as to...
Right, I understand that, but from me talking to anybody here sitting in this room tonight,
Fine.
there will be no restriction on that communication.
No, this is still America.
Exactly.
Okay. I don't want to neglect our county manager. I want you on the record of, do you have anything to add to this conversation? We would like to hear from you.
Will and with Bob.
Okay. Since I cannot make a motion, I am the
I'll make
facilitator of this meeting. I will open it, gentlemen, to a motion. What action would you
I'll make a
like to take?
motion that we enact the 6-month moratorium and freeze the permit process until the conclusion of the moratorium.
Second.
Madam Chair, just for...
Yes, for discussion?
Yeah, we had the July 10th date added at the beginning. Do you want to insert that at this point still?
Yes, I think either July 10th or July 11th. The 6 months would expire on July 10th. That's a Tuesday. If the commission needs to extend, my hope would be that we bring it back at July 10th.
So we need to add that?
Do you add that to your motion?
The 6 months, whether it comes out as July 10th or...
What?
Is that the date you need?
Well, the original direction of the board was a 6-month moratorium. This ordinance becomes effective upon filing with the Secretary of State. It's the 7th now. It'll probably take 3 days to mail it up there. So the 10th seems right, and because it falls on a Tuesday, there wouldn't be any gap period where it could expire before you could take
I'll
action.
add July 10th. To
Will you
I'll amend my
accept that?
second. Yes, ma'am.
Any other discussion? And you will not be voting, as I understand?
That is correct.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0 with Commissioner Davis abstaining because of interest.
Potential conflict.
Potential conflict. All right. Is there any other amendment or anything else to this motion or any other business?
No, ma'am, I would like to add, you did a great job, orderly fashion meeting.
Thank you. Well, we had a wonderful audience. The other thing I would like to point out is that you will bring back at a regular agenda meeting the process we will go through.
And Madam Chairman, if I could, before we close, our Agriculture Advisory Committee, of which I am the liaison, we will be discussing this, I believe it's at our January 11th meeting. Right? January 11th, Bob? Adair? Bob? 10th? January 10th. So feel free, anybody that would like to come down to the Agriculture Advisory Committee meeting at January the 10th.
Okay. There being no further business, we adjourn.